Hello, my name is Roman Jinjihashvili, and in this lecture, we're going to discuss um, positional play in the ending and taking care of some small positional advantage. Here is the position from the World Championship match between two players that we all know very well, Anatoly Karpov and Garry Kasparov, match in 1984. This was the position where white has some positional advantage. What is this positional advantage? They both have light squares. You see pawn on d4 is on a dark square, and pawn on d5 is on a light square, which indicates that white's bishop is better than black's bishop. On top of it, white can play, not right away, of course, but down the line they can play b4, which makes a6 pawn weak, and which further devalues black's light square bishop. So let's see what happened in the game. In the game, white played bishop takes f5. They have to do that because pawn on h4 is hanging, and playing hg is not a good idea because gives black potentially outside pass pawn after they play h4. So white goes bishop takes f5, bishop takes f5, attacking the bishop. Bishop goes to b1, and now pawn b4. Now we have position with a lot of pawns on the board and knight versus bishop. When there are 6 or more pawns on the board and side with a knight does not have clear pawn weaknesses, in 90% of the time, knight is a better piece than bishop. In the closed position, knight moves a lot easier and it's a lot more flexible than the bishop. Kasparov with the black here played g takes h, expecting g takes h, and it never crossed his mind, and it would never cross anyone else's mind that white can play in this position anything else. However, Karpov did not retake on h4. Played knight g2. Well, in my opinion, this is single-handedly the best positional move in the endgame I have seen. Well, not in my opinion, this is the best I have seen. And it's very, very deep. And it's going to take a while to understand, not only for you guys, the average players, but it takes some while to understand even for a very strong player. Here the essence of position. If white took on h4, black would go bishop g6, and white can put knight on f4, which will not do them any good, although knight on f4 is very strong. Now, what else can white do? They can put the king on f4, after which they can put knight on f5. And obviously black cannot take because white wins. But again, if black plays king g6, it's very, very difficult. I don't think it's possible for white to make further progress. King has no penetration path, so that's why position is drawn. Completely different picture happens after knight g2. Now, if white manages, if black doesn't do anything and white retakes, for example, on h4 with a knight, then what they will do, they will bring the king to f4. And pawn on h5 becomes very weak. And after knight f5, for example, black is going to have some very serious problems. Also, white has different plan. White may go knight g2, knight f4, and pawn is not on h4 but on g3. And now, since black is committed to passivity, then king g2, king h3, and king h4. White has good winning chances. So in this position, black cannot just let white take on h4 with a knight. They have to either take on g3 or to play h3. We're going to quickly rule out h3 move because it's the same if black played bishop c2 and knight h4. Because after h3 and knight f4, black is going to lose, and quickly, the h3 pawn. Right now, they're going to lose h5 pawn. So they may lose both of their pawns. And this is out of question. King will come to g1 and h2. h5 pawn is falling, and h3 pawn is going to fall eventually. So let's see what happened in the game. Black played natural hg. After king takes g3, now white is going to play knight f4. There is nothing black do about it. And they're going to win h-pawn. Bishop g6 will make no difference at all because king is going to come to h4 and white will take on h5. So, after taking on h5, black cannot retake white's knight because this pawn endgame is completely lost. After king g6, king e7, f4, and then white plays f5, and king g7. This is an easy win. So white will easily take on h5, and then we're gonna get position very similar to the position we got in the game. So what happened here is after h takes g, king takes g3, black played king e6, knight f4, king f5. This is kind of active defense. White plays knight takes h5. Of course, not on d5 because the pass pawn is a lot more important. Knight takes h5. Now they want to come back, knight on f4. King goes back, knight f4 check, king d6, and king g4. Now we got position that black wanted to get, but without h pawns for each. and now white has clear plan. King h5, king h6, and king g7. So it's very difficult for black to find any counterplay. I should say there is no counterplay. Simply, there is no counterplay. After king g4, there is nothing black can do. Bishop c2, king h5, bishop d1, king g6. And it's very, very instructive that Kasparov played here, king e7. He simply gave away on pawn on d5. Now, what would happen on bishop takes f3? After bishop takes f3, white has easily won game. After king takes f6, what white will do, they have to put the king on e5. But for that, they're going to have to chase black's king away. Well, this type of positions, it's very instructive to understand. The way you look at this position, you don't calculate move by move. You know that you can take your knight from here and without moving to anywhere, put on any square you want, because this knight can reach any square. Black will have to play with a bishop back and forth and wait what white is going to do. White is going to put the knight, well, let me give you an example. White is going to put the knight on f5. And knight on f5. King is going to have to move, then king is going to come to e5, and now is a threat of knight e3. And knight e7 check. And on king d7, knight e3. This pawn will definitely be lost on d5, after which it's just matter of elementary technique. So position is totally lost for black. That's why Kasparov, after king g6, he didn't take on f3, he played king e7, tried to create some problems for black. But knight takes d5, king e6, knight c7 check, king d7, king takes a6, knight takes a6, and now bishop takes f3, king takes f6, and king d6. What happens here? Now, black is 2 pawns down, but at least they have better king, and they have some chance, some hope to penetrate with the king. But it's too late, and white is consolidates easily. After king d6, there is king f5, king d5, king f4 attacking bishop, and bishop h1, and now king e3. So king is protecting d4 pawn. Now black has 2 extra pawns. White has 2 extra pawns, but still certain technique required. King c4. White doesn't want to let black king on b3 because then black bishop is going to attack white's knight, and white can lose both of their queenside pawns. So knight c5 stops black's king to approach from approaching white's pawns. And after knight c5, now what black has to do, just sit and wait. Then when bishop c6, now little maneuvering is going on, knight d3, bishop g2, knight e5 check. And this is another interesting point. After knight e5 check, black played king c3 and not king to b3. Why not king b3? Does it offer any drawing chances? No. King b3 would lose to simple king d3, and now black's king is trapped forever. What white has to do? Just push the d pawn all the way. The way they're gonna do it, they're gonna put their knight on f4 or f6 to guard the d5 square. For example, let's put the knight on f6. And now d pawn goes d5, d6, d7. There is nothing can be done by black. So these positions you have to look at schematically. So this is the type of position, well, the one that we look, that you can make 7, 8 moves in a row with white because black cannot do anything. So this is an easy win. Some people calculate, if I go knight to d7, then maybe he goes bishop h1, knight d7, then he goes bishop f3, I go knight f6. No, that's not the way you do that. The way you do that, I put knight on f6, then I control d5 square, d6, d7, and d8. There is no way for bishop to stop, and no way for king to get out of a3, come out. So that's an easy win. And obviously, for this reason, black didn't play it. But after knight c5, what happened that black played bishop c6. Now we go knight d3 and on bishop g2, knight e5 check. So they didn't go king b3, they went king c3. Well, on king d5 will be simple, king d3, and eventually king will come to c3, and knight will chase the king away. It's easy win for white. After knight e5 check, king c3 was played, and now knight g6. Knight goes to f4. King c4. Well, actually, knight goes to e7 to support d5. Knight f4 was just as good. King b3. Well, then king d3. So there is absolutely no defense. So bishop b7 was played. Now knight f5. Bishop g2 was played. Knight d6. And after king b3, knight takes b5. And on king a4, knight d6. Now when black takes the pawn, b pawn simply queens or wins the bishop. That's an easy win. Now, I think this is one of the most instructive players, and most of the instructive end game for player of any level. And again, after taking on f5 and knight e3, bishop b1, b4, this move, well, I was there. Actually, I was watching this game while it was in progress. And that was 26 years ago. And I still remember, and it's still stuck in my memory. That's what you do is give yourself a penetration square for the king. Very, very instructive endgame. And I thought, maybe black made a mistake. Maybe they shouldn't take on h4. And answer is yes, they shouldn't take on h4. Well, White still has sizable positional advantage. Black should have played simply bishop g6. Still white's advantage after king g2, king e6, king f4, knight g2, king e6, king e3. Well, what they try to do, maybe even to play, if king d6, this may be dangerous for black. Fg and now f4, threatening f takes g, and if pawn takes, then king takes and penetrates to g5, and if black pushes, then knight h4 followed by f5 will give white another option to get in on f4 square. White has some winning chances, but perhaps this was a better try for black than taking on h4. Well, then again, you can hardly blame black for taking on h4, because move like knight g2, maybe you can see once in a lifetime. And this move, after careful examination, I think wins by force. Very spectacular endgame and very instructive. It shows advantage, how to explore positional advantage and power of knight versus bishop in close type of endgames. I hope you learn from this lecture, and I will see you very soon. Thank you.